Hi, Acadiana. I'm meteorologist Dave Baker. Welcome to your Thursday. Gorgeous day here in Acadiana, but we now have a named tropical storm. Tropical Storm Sarah just recently being upgraded from Tropical Depression 19 over the far western Caribbean, and this is probably not going to strengthen a whole lot, but it is going to make a major impact on parts of Central America. Kind of some memories of Hurricane Mitch back in 1998. That was a Category 5 hurricane. It was also a late October, early November system. But after it moved over land, it stalled and rained itself out, and nearly 12,000 people across Central America lost their lives due to the incredible flooding. You have to remember the terrain is a lot different in Honduras and parts of Belize and going over toward Nicaragua. With a little bit more of a mountainous terrain, they just can't handle a lot of that very, very heavy rain. But we're going to get more into the details of Tropical Storm Sarah here coming up in just a little bit. But as I said, it is a beautiful day here in Lafayette. Our temperature 71 under mostly sunny skies. At dew point running down to 49, so the humidity at 45%. Nice way to dry out after all that heavy rain we saw on Wednesday. Winds are currently out of the north at 14, gusting up to 20 at times, and the pressure right now is at 30.06. And as you can see outside on our traffic cams, we've got blue skies everywhere you go, from here in Lafayette over toward Breaux Bridge and Henderson, and even getting on the Atchafalaya Basin Bridge. A lot of clear skies out there. Good driving conditions, although for some of the truckers, it might be a little bit breezy out there with those winds topping 20 miles per hour at times. And you can see that big ridge of high pressure is going to be settling in, and that high is also going to keep Sarah down to the south and also have it stall here over the next couple of days. And we've got another big trough that's now coming onto the west coast. That's going to impact us with a pretty strong cold front for next week, and we'll also pick up Sarah and probably shoot it off toward the north and northeast. Now again, the timing and how quickly Sarah is going to be interacting with the Yucatan Peninsula. Remember what we had yesterday with all the heavy rain. A lot of that was some of the remnant moisture of Rafael that was just kind of swirling around the middle part of the Gulf of Mexico. So some of this moisture from Sarah could get pulled up into this trough, and depending on the timing, we could see those flooding rains coming back either for Louisiana or for parts, areas toward the east, getting into Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. Right now, it looks like it's more likely it would be east of us. So we'll get to that forecast in just a little while too. Boaters are still having an issue getting out in the Gulf of Mexico as the winds are still pretty brisk thanks to the cold front that came through. Those seas are still running 3 to 5 feet, even higher in the far offshore waters where the winds are a bit more gusty. But at the very least, it is a very pretty day here at home, and also really much of the northern part of the Gulf Coast. We do have the clouds that are still kind of hugging the Florida Panhandle and points eastward with all that moisture there. Ridge of high pressure is going to kind of settle in, and again, that is going to push Tropical Storm Sarah a little bit farther off toward the west, but then it's going to be stalling it. You can see there's a big cold front there over the middle part of the Atlantic Ocean that extends down into the northern Caribbean islands, and that, we'll kind of watch that area because sometimes you can get new little tropical systems to kind of develop from a low that would kind of fire up on the tail end of a front. Not very likely and not really showing up in the models, but it is something to watch. But on our tropical weather outlook, 19, of course, has been upgraded to Tropical Storm Sarah. There it is, Tropical Storm Sarah with the new update there. And it is just kind of hugging the Central American coast. And you can see there's a lot of convection around the center, and we're starting to get a little bit more banding associated with it. So with reconnaissance aircraft going out there, they found a closed center of circulation and also those tropical storm force winds. So yeah, it gets the name. It is the 18th name on the list, and you keep wondering if this is going to be the last one of the hurricane season. Right now, according to some of the longer range models, it does appear that this might be one of the last ones, but could we get a Tony down the road? We'll have to watch and wait and see how that goes. But on the floater satellite, as you get that counterclockwise rotation, remember all of that moisture that's there over the western part of the Caribbean into the Gulf of Honduras is going to be pulling inland over the coast of Honduras and farther inland. And those elevations really go up pretty quick from sea level there along the coast. You don't have to go too far inland where you're working up to about 3,000–4,000 feet on the elevation. And of course, when you get that tropical moisture that comes streaming in at sea level, it has to be pushed upward because of the terrain, and the only thing that air can do is just let go of its moisture. So some of the rainfall expectations there over Honduras are going to be quite high here over the next several days. And notice how it's expected to slow to a crawl. It is not going to move a whole lot between now and the end of the weekend. And the latest forecasts are showing more of an interaction with land. So at this point, a couple days ago, we were talking about maybe this could become a hurricane over the western part of the Caribbean, maybe squeeze through the Yucatan Channel. But because of this slow in nature movement to the west and also the proximity to land, the forecast, at least for the intensity, has been dropped off a lot. I mean, we're talking about 45, 55 mile per hour winds at best as a tropical storm. We'll have to see how the structure holds together, because once it moves inland over Belize, there's going to be a trough coming in from the west that should pick it up and pull it northward, and then eventually it would get kicked off to the east. But we're going to have to see what it can do, if there's going to be any strengthening, or if this is just going to be a tropical depression or a non-tropical low. But it is going to be carrying a lot of moisture with it, and there's the forecast going over the next several days. Again, some models go out 7 days, some models only go about 3. The black line there that you see that says official OFCL, that's the National Hurricane Center's forecast, so at least the earlier one, and then moving off toward the west. That looks like it would move into the Bay of Campeche after about maybe 5 days. So there's your official National Weather Service forecast there for day 5. But most of the models are pretty much clustered in that same area, with everything kind of hugging the coast here along the Honduran coast over the next several days, and then going into Belize, maybe kind of scooting the northern part of Guatemala before moving into the Yucatan areas of Mexico. And notice the intensity models have dropped off quite a bit as well from earlier forecasts, where the thinking was it was going to stay over water. Now, with more of an interaction with land, you're seeing virtually all the models running at minimal tropical storm force strength going out for the next several hours. Ship's model still goes up to Cat 1. It's probably indicating that it's going to stay over water according to that model. But you've also got a lot of models that keep it tropical storm or even a strong tropical depression here over the next several days. So we'll start with the HWRF model, and I'm using the precipitable water here because it kind of gives you a little better idea of where the moisture concentration is going to be there as it moves inland. And then you see that ridge of high pressure kind of move off the east coast with the trough coming in from the west. And that's going to be that weak point that it should allow it to pull a little bit faster and more toward the northwest once it gets over the Yucatan. So you can see the high kind of moving away, the next trough coming in from the west, and then it tries to turn in between the both of those, which would lift it closer to the northern Gulf Coast. But with the number of days here, again, this is a 5-day outlook. Most of those days, this thing is hugging the Honduran coastline. And the HAFS model is also showing a tremendous amount of moisture just kind of staying in that one area. Notice how that ridge over Florida and the Gulf really kind of flattens out, but eventually that trough comes in and it tries to find that weakness. So it is pretty close. Both of these hurricane models are pretty close to each other, but look at the rainfall totals here, and I kind of superimpose the scale there on the right, and this is all the way through Monday, and you can see there over the northern part of Honduras, there are some forecast models that are putting in over 20 inches of rain here. And again, it does drop off as it starts to move into the mountainous terrain, but it's going to have to rain itself out here. And then, of course, all that water is going to be rushing its way down toward the south. And with Hurricane Mitch, that was devastating over the western part of Honduras, parts of Guatemala, and going into Belize. And I did put a Wikipedia article link in the description below if you want to revisit that. And there was a book that the kids and I, when they were doing their AR points way back in the day, we did several weather books. We did several hurricane books, and one of them was about Hurricane Mitch. It was about a little boy who was 13 years old trying to get help for the village that he lived in that had been cut off by the devastating floods. And he made this journey by himself to get to one of the bigger cities so that he could let people know that there were a lot of people that were stranded. So I think it was called The Storm. If I figure out what the name of that book was and the author, I can put that down there. It was a really good book. Read it about maybe 15 years ago with the kids when they were earning their AR points there in elementary school. So here's the latest GFS model. Again, very similar to our hurricane models. You see that trough kind of picking it up, but it does send perhaps a tropical depression or a tropical storm over toward Florida, but you can see that it spends most of its time over Central America before getting whipped out to sea. And that trough that's coming in from the west is going to be pretty significant. I think that's going to be a good cold blast for us here in Louisiana, where maybe late next week we might see highs in the 50s to near 60 and maybe some nighttime lows getting back into the 30s. But I also want you to notice how after this leaves Central America, and this is the Euro model we're looking at here, you see how it just kind of spins there over Central America. And then once that trough starts to pull in from the west, notice how it taps into that moisture and you get a lot of heavy rain. So the Euro model is actually producing some really heavy rain going into next week ahead of that trough over southeastern Louisiana and parts of the Mississippi and Alabama Gulf Coast. Canadian model is also very similar, raining itself there over the Central America, but then you see how that moisture gets pulled in with that next front, that next trough. So someone along the northern Gulf Coast is going to be getting some very heavy rains if it can tap into this tropical moisture. And the ICON model is also very, very similar. So most of our global models, our hurricane models, are all in agreement right now with this particular path, and also the fact that it's going to be stalling there down to the south. So there is a week from today, according to the GFS. You can see that we've got a low pressure area kind of working its way over toward the Florida peninsula, and we've also got that deep trough that's coming in from the west. You see those bluer lines, those are the heights of the mid-levels. That's the 500 millibar height, and usually during November, you're probably in the 570s, 580s, somewhere in that range. But when you start to get below 540, you're talking about some really, really cold air. European model, a week from today, notice it's showing a pretty good amount of heavy rain along the eastern Gulf Coast, Alabama, Florida, Georgia. And the Canadian model, a week from today, kind of has more of the moisture pulling over toward Florida, Georgia, and then maybe into South Carolina. And the ICON model is also showing the bulk of the heavy rain kind of coming in on the eastern side of the Gulf of Mexico. So based on some of the extended models going out 6 and 7 days, at this point, I'm not anticipating a push of tropical moisture that would bring a heavy rain event like we saw yesterday. It looks like right now most of the models are indicating any kind of heavy rain event along the Gulf Coast is going to be a little bit farther to the east of us. But this is the 7-day rainfall according to the one of the models here. And you can see the heavy amounts of rain over Central America, but you also see a hot spot from Acadiana eastward going over toward Florida with some pretty heavy rains, maybe a heavy rain event over Mississippi and Alabama. And again, this would be some of that tropical moisture associated from Sarah that could get pulled into this trough that's going to be moving across the central part of the U.S. and throwing a cold front through the Acadiana region. So it's not just going to be Central America that's going to be affected by this. Somewhere in the southeastern United States is going to be getting a tremendous amount of rain sometime during the week next week. Water temperatures are very high. They're still kind of high in the Gulf of Mexico, and the heat potential is there, but it's so close to land right now, it doesn't look like it's going to be able to tap into some of this oceanic heat potential. So that's why a lot of the models are showing not just with it interacting with land, but also a little bit more significant wind shear is going to be in this area too over the next several days. So with land and wind shear, it's probably not going to be a strong system, but it's going to be a big rain producer. And I think Central America is probably going to be in some of your world news feeds here coming up in the next several days. But if it does move into the Gulf of Mexico, there's going to be a tremendous amount of wind shear over the central, southern, and even the eastern Gulf of Mexico going through the early and mid part of next week. So anything that emerges off of the Yucatan Peninsula probably wouldn't be able to strengthen. But as I said, if we tap into some of that tropical moisture, there's going to be a heavy rain event over parts of the southeastern United States. We will get another update on Tropical Storm Sarah at 3 o'clock this afternoon. It's also going to bring a new forecast and forecast track. And then we'll have another one of those that will come down at 9. But because we've got hurricane watches and tropical storm watches that are posted for the Honduran coastline, we get updates every 3 hours. So noon, 3, 6, 9, midnight, 3, 6, and 9. Those are going to be the times that you're going to get your updates, and I will pop those up on social media. And of course, I'll have more on that on Acadiana Weather Today starting tomorrow morning. But that's what I've got for you today. I want to let you know that I'm going leaving here in just a few minutes to go visit with some 6th graders over at John Paul the Great Academy. Looking forward to that visit. They have their own weather station that you can find on Weather Underground. If you know where John Paul the Great is and you pull up that wonder map that they've got on Weather Underground, you can just kind of zoom in there and you can find their data. They picked up a little over 3.5 or about 3.25 inches of rain yesterday, and I'm really looking forward to visiting with the kids because each one of the kids has a different town or city that they have been monitoring weather data, and I'm really interested to see what they've come up with and if they've seen some extremes, kind of like what we saw here in Lafayette yesterday with the heavy rain. So looking forward to seeing Mr. Artigue's 6th graders there and talking about weather and climate and talking about how to measure the weather and how the fact that they've got their own rain gauge and their own weather station there. The more points that we have between all of the airports, the more data we get and the more we can understand how the atmosphere is working and if climate change is happening or not happening or how quickly it could be happening. So it's really going to be cool to go visit them, and I'll have more about them tomorrow morning on Acadiana Weather Today. Don't forget, you could still hear my forecast on Big 102.1, Planet Radio, and Freedom 95.1. Also, like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on those notifications. And for additional updates on Tropical Storm Sarah or anything weather, please visit my Facebook and X pages. There are the handles, and you can follow those and get updates throughout the day. I'm meteorologist Dave Baker. Thanks for joining me on Let's Talk Tropics on this Thursday. I will talk to you on Acadiana Weather Today between 7 and 7:30 tomorrow morning. Have a great afternoon.